Al Kadosh, Boker Or, Masechet Makot, Daf Bet, Amud Aleph. We are going to start as follows. Remember, Masechet Makot comes after Sanhedrin. The Mishnah says, Ketzad Aedim Na'asim Zomim. How are Edim going to become Edim Zomim? Remember, Edim Zomim means false witnesses. That we're going to say Imanu Ayitem, as Rashi already brings down, which means that how are the Edim going to become Edim Zomimim? So says the Gemara, two different cases. Right, the Mishnah says two different cases. Case number one, when you're going to come, you're going to have two people come into Bedin, and they testify about a Kohen, that he's a Ben Grusha Chalutza. Remember that if a person is going to be a Ben Grusha, it's min ha-Torah that he is pasul lekiuna. Chalutza is the Rabbanan, but it's an Masechta, but they learn it from Ve'isha Gerusha Meisha, lo yikachu, that a Kohen is not allowed to get married to a Chalutza. Remember, Grusha means that he got divorced with a get. And therefore, Rashi already brings down that they saw the get taking place. They know about the get as a fact. The next case was Chalutza. Remember, was that the woman did Chalitza. What does that mean? The husband died without children. And then the brother-in-law did Chalitza. Chalitza, exactly. Takes off the shoe and the boot, and then they spit, and so on and so forth. So if a person, the two witnesses come into Bedin, and they say that this Kohen has a Ben Grusha Chalutza. So we're not going to say that they are going to become Ben Grusha Chalutza, but rather they get lashes, 39 lashes. Here it always says 40, which means 39. Second case, right, liglot, which means if you're going to have two people come into Medina, they say that this person killed accidentally. By killing accidentally, he has to go to galut, he has to go to exile, to the Harem Miklat. So we are not going to say that these people are going to go to galut instead of them, right? But rather, loket arba'im, they're going to get 40 lashes. Again, it's the 39 lashes. Okay, until you're clear, this is the Mishnah. Which one? It always says 40, just like it says Arba'im Melachot. Right? There's 40, and then it's going to become 39. Yes. We always speak about it, but it's always the 40 that becomes 39. Okay? Says the Gemara. Ha Keitzad Enaidim Nasim Zomin. Right? They did it purposely so you could ask. Right? So he says like this. Ha Keitzad Enaidim Nasim Zomin. Right? They're getting you ready. Yeah? So he says, right? 1 second. This is a case of Kasher Zaman. In our Mishnah, we said, how do Edim become Zomim? Remember, Edut Azama is you're right, is when you're going to come, but really, they should get the same punishment. And here it's leka, here it's opposite. You always get what you look for. What does that mean? What does that mean? You always get what you plan, right? What goes around comes around. Life is like a boomerang. What does that mean, right? You came and you wanted them, so it should have happened to you. It didn't happen. It's completely different than Azama. So it should have said That's question number one. And furthermore, question number two, we learned later on, later on in the Famud Aleph, it says, right there in the Mishnah, how do you make a din zomim? And it says over there that the Imanu Ayitem, so over there it's mashma, these are a din zomim. So it's mashma that what we're learning here is not a din zomim. So why do we say that our Mishnah is a din zomim? That later on in the Mishnah, that's a din zomim. So it says the Gemara, you're right. Tana Hatam Kai. Our Mishnah, the author of our Mishnah, is going back to Sanhedrin. Over there. Remember that the last perek in Sanhedrin was not perek chelek, yesh lahem chelek l'umba or en lahem chelek l'umba, but rather perek eluhen hanechenekin. These are the ones that they get chenek. And we spoke about, right, the bat kohen u'bo'olah. So it says over here like this. Tana Hatam Kai, we're over there. Kol hazomimim magdimim lotamita. All the zomim, they go to the same death penalty that they wanted to do. Meaning, if they wanted somebody to get, right, chenek, they get chenek. They wanted somebody to get hereg, they get hereg. They wanted somebody to get skila, they get skila. They always got the same death penalty. Except for zomim bat kohen u'bo'olah, except for the zomimim of a bat kohen u'bo'olah. Meaning, when a woman commits adultery, yeah, when a woman commits adultery, she's a married woman. What does she get? Chenek. What does he get? The adulterer. What does he get? Chenek. If she's engaged, what does she get? Sekila. What does he get? Sekila. But what happens now if it's a bat kohen?
Gets all four.
Huh? Srefa. She gets srefa. What does the boil get? Chenek. Now the question is that going to be, what about now if she's engaged? No, it's sekila srefa. Srefa is the mitzvah shtayim. Srefa. Lama chen? No, which one? No, so the question is like this. By bat kohens, יותר גרוע. בגלל היא מחללת בית אביה. אז בגלל שהיא מחללת בית אביה, it's worse for her. So since it's worse for her, she gets שרפה. But the boel doesn't. Because it says, באש תשרף, היא תשרף, ולא בועלה בשרפה. The boel is not מחלל בית אביה. The boel is just having relations with the woman. There's no difference who it is. She's the one that she's מחללת בית אביה. So for she gets שרפה, not the boel. So it says, חוץ מצוממים בת כהן ובועלה, שאין מקדימים לו את המיטה, מיטה אחרת. They don't get the same death penalty. Meaning, not only does the boel not get the same death penalty, even the zomemim of the bat kohen don't get. Why? Because we say, "Vasilon kasher la'achiv velo la'achoto." So it's for the brother and not for the sister. So therefore, they only get chenek. They do not get serefa. There's going to be other edim zomim. Shenosim ba'edim azama kol yikar that they don't do azama at all. Ela malkut arba'im, but rather 40 lashes. Kate, what is that case? Our Mishnah. Midiyam no b'dishu rushu b'koshu b'chalutza no b'nim esad zeme koshu b'chalutza tachtav. Ela loket arba'im. Capish until you're not. Which means that our Mishnah was a continuation of Sanhedrin. So in Sanhedrin, we spoke about that there are certain cases that kol hazomim makdimin lo tamita chutz mizomim b'bat kohen u'bo'ala she'en makdimin lo tamita lemita acheret. Which means that there does exist a case that it's not 100% hazama, but you don't do the same death penalty. And then he says sometimes you don't do hazama at all. But what do you get? Lashes. What is that case? Our Mishnah. So that's our Mishnah. So the Gemara is now going to ask, how do you know that? How do you know? How do you know that you don't make them into ben Rucha v'chalutza? So there's going to be two different opinions. So Yeshua ben Levi says of Yeshua ben Levi, the pasuk says, "Vatzilin lo kasher zamam, lo velo lo zaro." It says you have to do kasher zamam, but the kasher zamam is only to him, not to his children. These two witnesses, they came and they testified about a certain person that he's a bat kohen, he's a ben Rucha v'chalutza. So they're going to become a halal. Now 1 second. If you make the edin zomim halalim, what happens to the children? They also become halalim. It says, "Vatzilin lo kasher lo velo lo zaro." You can only punish them. You can't punish the children. So ask the Gemara, which means, fine, disqualify them and not their children. Just make them halalim, not their children. So says the Gemara, what are you talking about? Right? You have to make the kasher zamam. You're going to make it. Meaning, if you're only going to make the din zomim into halalim and not their children, that's not kasher zamam. Kasher zamam means that they wanted to come and make this kohen into a halal, him and all his children, all his descendants. So the same thing, you have to go back. You have to reciprocate. You didn't do it. So there's no kasher zamam. So therefore, there's only lashes. Second opinion, right? Barpada comes and he says, it's a kavachomen. What's a kavachomen? Uma mechalel nitchalel, ba lechalev lo chilo l'nitchul yitchalel. This is 1 second. Kavachomen is as follows. The mechalel is not mitchalel. Who's the mechalel? The kohen that gets married to a grusha v'chalutza. This kohen that got married to a grusha v'chalutza, does he become a halal? No. So umaha mechalel, he's making halalim, eno mitchalel. Hu be'atzmo lo mitchalel. He himself does not become a halal. It's true that when he's married to the grusha v'chalutza, he cannot do birkat kohanim, but he himself never becomes a halal. If he gets divorced and he what? הוא לא פסול. בזמן שהוא עם גרושה וחלוצה, אסור לו לעשות דברים שאסור לו לעשות ברכת כהנים, לא מכבדים אותו. It's not אסור. If he actually does ברכת כהנים, if you remember, we said we keep quiet, right? But we don't give him the kavod of keuna, meaning he doesn't go up to the Torah Kohen, like all these things. But let's say all of a sudden he gets divorced, and he swears he's not going to get married to גרושה וחלוצה again. He's a Kohen רגיל עוד פעם. ממש, הוא תמיד היה כהן, הוא אף פעם לא נהיה חלל. 1 second. So since he never became a חלל, ומה מחלל אינו מתחלל, הבא לחלל. These guys, עדים זומים, they wanted to be מחלל somebody. ולא חיללו, but they didn't do it. So אינו דין שלא יתחלל, ושוב they shouldn't become, right? They shouldn't become חללים. So says the Gemara, 1 second, so מתקיף לרבינו, רבינה asked, אם כן ביטלת תורת עדים זומים, so you just got rid of all the עדים זומים. Why? He comes and he says, בית המובט, to be or not to be. ומה סוקל נסקל, הבא לסקול ולא סקל, לדין שלא יסקל? So 1 second, I'm going to make a קל וחומר. What's a קל וחומר? Right? We know that there's a halacha that we do kasher zamam, right? That, what is it? Hargu in, right? Neragim, right? Gulo. What does that mean? You only do kasher zamam what you plan to do. If you already did it, it's already an action. You don't do kasher zamam anymore. Because it's already became from a machshava to a maaseh. It already became that something happened. So it's based upon the pasuk. The pasuk says, right, hargu en eragim, because it says kasher zamam lo kasher asa. Only what you plan to do, not what asita, right? Lo kasher asa. So what happens? What happens is that you have two edim, that they came to Bedin and they said somebody has to get sekila. What happens? They did do sekila. Do you kill them now? Meaning they came and they were sakal mishu. And then we found out they're false witnesses. Do we kill them? No. Hargu and nenagim. If they kill, they don't get killed. So says the Gemara, make a kavachomer. If two witnesses came and they got a guy killed, and they themselves don't become killed, so kavachomer, if somebody only wanted to kill, and they didn't actually kill somebody, kavachomer, they don't get killed. So therefore, you just annulled kol Torah tedim zomim. With the kalvachomer, you just destroyed everything. So he comes and he says, you're right. La machvarta, right? What does that mean? We go back to the original answer. The original answer was, so for somebody who's ever going to ask you, why don't we make these people it's like a katuf. It's a gzerat katuf. Gzerat katuf lo velo lazarot, to him and not to his children. And therefore, you're not going to come, you're not going to do anything to. There's the two dots. Beta mubed, the two dots. Says the Gemara. The Gemara comes and it says, we just said, we said that if you're going to testify that the two people that they came and they testified that he's chayav galut. They don't go to galut. How do we know these words? Says the Gemara, the pasuk says, he has to run to the edim zomim. He has to run to ira miklat. Him and not the zomimim. So the Shakish comes and he says, "Hu yanu salachat harim, hu v'lo zomim," which means he's the only one that has to run to the Eid Miklat, but not anybody else. Why? Because he obviously didn't do anything. Rabbi Yochanan comes and he says it's a kavachomer. What's a kavachomer? Ma'hu she'asa ma'aseh b'mezid no goleh. He was the one that he did in maaseh purposely, and he doesn't go to galut. Meaning, if a person comes and he kills purposely, he doesn't go to galut. Hence, shelo asu maaseh b'mezid. So they did not do a maaseh b'mezid. Enudin shelo yiglu. Obviously, they're not going to go to galut. So says the Gemara the opposite. Yeah, no tenet, the exact opposite. When a person comes and he kills purposely, he doesn't go to galut, in order that he doesn't have a kapara. Hence, but they did not do a ma'aseh b'mezid, they should go to galut. Why? They should get a kapara. We go back to the Shakish. That means each time we pushed off the kal v'chomer and we went back to the Gezerat HaKatuv. Amar Ula. Ula comes and he says, Remez l'edim zomim min haTorah mi'ayin. How do we know that there's a remez l'edim zomim min haTorah? So he says, what are you talking about? He says, Remez v'aktiv, it's written in Furash in the Torah. V'asidin lo kasher zemam. Well, it's written in the Torah about edim zomim. Now you're going to have to, where's it written? It's written in Furash. Ela remez l'edim zomim shelokim min haTorah mi'ayin. Where's the remez that they get Malkut? So he says, Dichtib, it says the pasuk, Yitzchik, Otzei v'shelu v'nshav v'midim k'zosh v'nshav. He says they were matzdik the tzaddik, yishu et rasha, v'yam binekot rasha. So says the Gemara, mishum v'yitzdiku et hashiv v'yitzdiku v'yam binekot rasha. He says, I don't understand. What are we talking about? What's the case? Imagine you have two people going to bedin. One becomes a tzaddik, one becomes a rasha. Automatically, you give the rasha, you give him lashes. Say you have an argument. You go to bedin. One person's a rasha, tzaddik. That's it. Says, no, edim she'yishu et tzaddik. We're talking about edim that they came and they made the tzaddik into a rasha. That edim achrin, the other edim came, v'yitzdiku et tzaddik l'mikara, and they made the tzaddik a tzaddik from the beginning. Shavinu lanu reshaim, and they made this person into a rasha. V'yayim binakot rasha, and then it's going to be a rasha. V'teipu klei. So ask the Gemara, why don't we just learn from lo ta'aneh? Lo ta'aneh melechad jacket. What does that mean? You have a negative commandment that you don't have to give lashes. Right? Lo ta'aneh. It's a negative commandment that does not have an action. Edim zomim is not an action. So the fact that there's no action, I cannot give lashes on something which is not an action. Okay? Fine. Braita. Tanur Banam, we learned to the Braita. Dalet varim nemru bedim zomim. There's going to be 4 things which are brought down to do with edim zomim. En naasim ben gusha v'chalutza. We do not make a ben gusha v'chalutza. En golin la'are miklat. Right? We're not going to go to arel miklat. These are the first 2 which are the Mishnah. Number 3, em shalmim et kofer, they don't pay kofer. Number 4, enim karim be'evedivri, they don't get sold as an evedivri. And mishum Rabbi Kiva amru, in the name of Rabbi Kiva they said, they don't pay through themselves. So says the Gemara, they don't become a just like we said before. That was our Mishnah. They don't go to galut, just like we said. That was our Mishnah before. They don't pay kofir, because they hold kufra kapara. That kofir is a kapara. But they don't get the kapara. Why? If you kill someone, you have to pay a kofir, a kapara for you because your ox went and killed someone. But if your ox didn't kill somebody, why in the world are you going to pay kapara? Kufra is kapara. They're not paying kapara. So says the Gemara, Mantana kufra kapara. Who's the one that holds kufra kapara? So Amar of Chasta says of Chasta, it's a Mishal Menosha Beroka Memlokai. Rabbi Yishmael the son of Beroka Memloka. To Tanya we learned to the Braita. Natam Pidyon Nafsho. What does it mean Natam Pidyon Nafsho? To Menizak. You have to give the valuation of the one that got damaged. The Nizak, the one that got damaged. Rabbi Yishmael Beroka Memloka Omer. Rabbi Yishmael the son of Beroka Memloka comes and he says, no. The memazik, it's your value. The one that damaged, not the one that got damaged, the damager, the one that damaged. So he says the memazik. So says the Gemara, is there no machlok between them? The more savar, that one of them holds kufra mono musafar kafla kapara. Some of Papa says no, lo dechule alma according to everybody kufra kapara. It is kufra kapara. It's kapara. So what is the machloket then? More sabab nizak shamim musaf mazik. What do you evaluate? You have to pay which value? The value of the mazik or the nizak? Why? My tamad rabbanan. What's the reasoning of the rabbis? Ne'emar hashata lemala v'ne'emar hashata lemata. It says hashata above and it says hashata lemata. So we're talking about that when you're going to, if a person comes and he punches a pregnant woman and she loses the child. So it says kasher yashita la bala yishav natam b'filim. And it says hashata over here. So he says just like over there, it's a nizak. So to here nizak, meaning you always have to pay the one that got damaged. But according to Rabbi Ishmael, it says no. V'natam pidyon nafsho. You have to give your pidyon nefesh. When you give pidyon nefesh, you have to give your own. That's for you, the one that's giving it, right? Rabbanan. It's not written in pidyon nashoktiv. So he says yes, it is written. But miu ki shaymin. I mean, it is written in pidyon nasho. But how do you evaluate it? You evaluate it with an izak. Okay. Next, enim karim be'eved ivri. You never sell him as a slave. So he says, Savar Ravnuna, I thought to say, Hanimil, when do you not sell the Edim Zomim as a slave? Only if he's got money. Why? If you come and you tell that this guy comes and he owes money, so he would have paid himself out. He wouldn't have become an Evedivri. So therefore, Migu, since he wouldn't have been sold, so therefore they're not also going to be sold. And even though, let's say, they don't have money, it doesn't matter. They're not going to be sold. So he says, right? However, though, however, though, what happens if he doesn't have money? So even though they do have money, they would be sold. So says the Gemara, why can't they just tell him if you would have had money, you wouldn't have been sold? So we should have also not been sold, right? If you would have had you wouldn't have been sold. So to Ananami, so to we also we shouldn't be sold. You're right. One of these words, says where the money that one of them has money. Doesn't matter whether it's the defendant, the litigant, or the edim zomnim. Somebody has money. But if nobody has money, then they're going to be sold. That is Rav Amuna. Comes a Gemara, Rava says, what are you talking about? The Torah says that he's going to be sold with his Geneva. Only in his Geneva, not as the Mema. Therefore, you're not going to be sold. So according to that, that's what we finish. That according to Rava, you're never sold as an Eved. Why? Right? It's only if you sold something that you get sold. You're never gonna get sold because of Edim Zomnim. Okay, the next two dots. In the name of Rabbi Akiva, they said that you don't pay al pi atzmam. My time at Rabbi Akiva, what's the reasoning of Rabbi Akiva? Kasavar, but he holds knasa, it's a knas. And therefore, knas, which means like this. Right now, it's a fine, it's a penalty. Remember, a penalty, whenever you come and you what's the word? You admit. Huh? Yeah, you give it back or you admit to a penalty, you never have to pay the penalty. So he says, how do you know? So Rabbi says, they didn't do an action and they still get killed, or they still pay. That's a proof that it's a penalty. It's not mamon, it's not money, it's a penalty. Rav Nachman comes and he says, the money is still in the hands of the owners and they're still paying. So says the Gemara, 1 second. I don't understand what you're saying then. He says, why? He says, right? I know the Rabba. He says, Rav Nachman and Rabba says, one of them was saying that you didn't do a maaseh and they still get killed and they have to pay. And the other one is just saying that the money is in the hands of the defendant and they're still paying. It's the same thing. So he says, you're right. You have to answer, and also Rav Nachman says the exact same thing.